I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining the broadcast. Here are tonight's headlines.
The Philippine Department of Health said the biosurveillance activities of the country have been closely monitoring 46 sublineages of the Delta variant of COVID-19 and so far have not detected the AY.4.2 sublineage.
More than 250,000 homes in France were without electricity after gale force winds swept the north of the country overnight.
In the U.S., a former student pleaded guilty on Wednesday to killing 17 people in a shooting rampage at a high school in Parkland, Florida, and apologized in court to the relatives of the victims.
And Iglesia Ni Cristo members in Ottawa participate in a cleanup drive as part of the Glad Cleaning the Capital.
This may bring mold and...
First, here in the country, the Philippine Department of Health said today the biosurveillance activities of the country have been closely monitoring 46 sublineages of the Delta variant of COVID-19 and so far have not detected the AY.4.2 sublineage. Now, the DOH made the statement following reports on the increase of sublineage AY.4.2 in the United Kingdom and UK and its detection in other countries. As of this moment, experts are still studying the potential impact of the Delta sublineage on the transmissibility and severity of COVID-19, according to Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Bergere in a news release. She said the particular Delta sublineage has not yet been detected among COVID-19 positive samples sequenced in the country. The DOH reminds the public that while variants may contribute to increasing or aggravating COVID-19 cases, strict and other proper adherence to the minimum public health standards reduces the risk of getting exposed to COVID-19, and the general adult population should immediately get vaccinated to get additional protection against COVID-19.
Israel has confirmed a case of a subvariant of the Delta strain of the coronavirus previously reported in some European countries, according to their health ministry. An 11-year-old boy arriving from Europe was the carrier, the ministry said, adding that the case was identified at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv. The boy was quarantined and no further contacts have been discovered, according to the ministry. Now, the AY.4.2 variant has turned up several times in the United Kingdom. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett held an emergency meeting on Wednesday with health ministry officials and announced that Israel would take measures to preserve the positive results of the fight against the virus. That's coming from a statement from his office. Now, changes to entry requirements for visitors would also be considered. Francois Balou, professor of computational systems biology at University College London, has told AFP that the subvariant is rare and does not appear to pose the same risk of significantly increasing transmission as other strains.
A booster shot of the anti-COVID-19 vaccine developed by Pfizer-BioNTech is 95.6% effective against symptomatic infection. That according to the trial data published by the makers today. Now, the clinical phase 3 trial with 10,000 participants, 16 years of age and older, showed a relative vaccine efficacy of 95.6% against the disease during a period when Delta was the prevalent strain, according to the companies in a statement. The study presented the first results of a booster trial with a third shot of the vaccine demonstrating a favorable safety profile. Several countries have already approved COVID-19 booster shots to increase immunity in people who have already been vaccinated but whose protection may have dipped after several months per some studies. In the US, the Federal Food and Drug Administration approved a third dose in September for everyone age 65 and up, as well as people at high risk of developing severe COVID.
Now, major new developments on COVID-19 vaccinations. We have the FDA approving a mixing and matching booster doses of the Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and Pfizer vaccine. According to the new decision, people who received 2 Moderna shots initially and are 65 or older, over 18 and at high risk for COVID, or over 18 and have high occupational exposure may now receive a booster. All adults who received the one-shot J&J vaccine more than 2 months ago are also eligible for a booster. Previously, only immune-compromised people or people who belong to elderly or high-risk groups and had received the Pfizer vaccine initially were eligible for a boost. The CDC still has to give its approval.
Meanwhile, the White House COVID-19 response coordinator, Jeff Zients, details the U.S. plan for vaccinating children aged 5 to 11 against COVID-19 starting next month, saying that more than 25,000 pediatricians' offices will provide vaccines for their rollout to younger age groups. Take a look.
We have secured vaccine supply to vaccinate every child ages 5 through 11. And as soon as the vaccine is authorized by the FDA, we will begin shipping millions of doses nationwide. We've already enrolled more than 25,000 pediatricians, family doctors, and other primary care providers to administer vaccines. And we're working with states and localities to enroll more. We're also collaborating with the Children's Hospital Association to work with more than 100 children's hospitals across the country to stand up vaccination sites in their communities. Children's hospitals will partner with local community and faith-based organizations to host vaccination events, including in the evenings and on weekends, so parents can get their kids vaccinated at hours that work for them. And importantly, we worked with Pfizer to modify the packaging of the pediatric doses to make it easier for pediatricians, family doctors, and other providers to provide vaccines to children. And these vaccine doses will be shipped with all the supplies needed to vaccinate kids, including smaller needles.
During a clinical trial, children in the 5 to 11 age group received a 2-dose regimen of 10 micrograms compared with 30 micrograms for older age groups. The shots were given 21 days apart, and the side effects were generally comparable to those observed in participants 16 to 25 years of age. Pfizer said in a statement, adding that the shots induced a robust antibody response. Pain and swelling at the injection site have been among the most commonly reported side effects in people of all ages, along with headaches, chills, and fever. Pfizer made no mention of the rare side effect of myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart muscle that has been linked to the vaccine, mostly among adolescents, males, and those in their 20s.
One of the world's most locked down cities will reopen late Thursday, with Melbourne residents hoping this 6th bout of stay-at-home restrictions will be their last. 5 million people in Australia's second biggest city have endured lockdowns, totaling more than 260 days since the beginning of the pandemic. But now that 70% of eligible people in Melbourne and surrounding Victoria State are fully vaccinated, restrictions that began on August 5th will be lifted. When the clock strikes midnight tonight, the lockdown is over, according to State Deputy Premier James Merlino, hailing the state's extraordinary efforts. Half a dozen lockdowns have taken their toll on the once buzzing city, which prided itself on a vibrant science or art scene and cafe culture. Now in 2021, it lost the mantle of Australia's most livable city amid violent anti-lockdown protests and small exodus of residents to COVID-free regional towns.
Meanwhile, authorities in China are now canceling hundreds of flights, closing schools, and ramping up mass testing to try and stamp out a new COVID-19 outbreak linked to a group of tourists. The latest outbreak was linked to an elderly couple who were in a group of several tourists. They started in Shanghai. And right back.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Araw-araw sa panahon ngayon, may daming tanong kailangan ng tugon. Nandito si Ali at si Papi na rin, ang smart at pretty nanay, ang sigla pang nagkwentuhan. Ang sigaw ng Pinoy Nation, information, education. Ating salaopin, ipakita natin ang nagsagot sa problema natin. Ano sa palagay nyo? Ano sa palagay nyo? Ano sa palagay nyo?
Ano sa palagay nyo? Lunes hanggang Biyernes, alas 8 hanggang alas 10 ng umaga. Mapapanood sa Net25 TV, Facebook page and YouTube channel. Mapapakinggan din sa DZEC 1062 at Eagle FM 95.5.
Karamihan sa ating mga Pilipino, mahilig talaga sa snacks, ano?
Kasi yun ang hinahanap ng bibig.
Pero yun lang ang pinakalibangan namin.
Aba meron nang nauuso na healthy version ng mga ito.
Kangkong to, gulay to, nagugustuhan rin kasi it's healthy for the children. Kung may Korean craze ngayon sa Pilipinas, may craze rin para sa banana chips natin doon sa Korea.
Unique siya kasi madami ding health benefits at pasok sa panlasa nating mga Pinoy.
Ito na ang inyong starter pack for a healthy snack. Ako po, si Robin Padilla, at ito po ang ulat, kaagapay sa hanap buhay.
Welcome back. Authorities in China canceled hundreds of flights, closed schools, ramped up mass testing to try and stamp out a new COVID outbreak linked to a group of tourists. The latest outbreak was linked to an elderly couple who were in a group of several tourists. They started in Shanghai before flying to Xi'an, Gansu province and Inner Mongolia. Dozens of cases have since been linked to their travel with close contacts in at least 5 provinces and regions, including the capital, Beijing. In response, local governments have rolled out mass testing and closed scenic spots and tourist sites, schools and entertainment venues in affected areas, and also imposed targeted lockdowns of housing compounds. And on Wednesday, state-owned tabloid Global Times cautioned that the new virus cases in Inner Mongolia were likely to affect coal imports from Mongolia because of supply chain disruptions. There were 13 new domestic cases reported today, according to China's National Health Commission.
Russian President Vladimir Putin orders a nationwide week-long paid holiday starting on October 30th to curb COVID infections amid a record coronavirus deaths. Take a look.
По всей стране нерабочих дней с сохранением работниками заработной платы в период с 30 октября по 7 ноября включительно.
Moscow will shut non-essential services between October 28 and November 7, its mayor said Thursday, as coronavirus deaths soar in Russia, the country in Europe hardest hit by the pandemic amid dramatically low vaccination rates. Russia reported a record 1,036 COVID-19 deaths in a single day Thursday, but officials have warned the worst is yet to come, with only 35% of Russians fully vaccinated. Restaurants and cafes will be able to sell takeaway food. Mass events will be banned and schools will be closed, with the days off coinciding with national school holidays. Theaters and museums can stay open, but entry will be allowed only with QR codes. President Putin on Wednesday linked Russia's high death rates to what he called an unfortunately low vaccination rate.
Meanwhile, India administered its 1 billionth COVID-19 vaccine dose today as it fights its way back from a devastating surge in cases that brought the healthcare system close to collapse. Prime Minister Narendra Modi hailed the feat as a triumph of Indian science, but authorities remain on guard for a new pandemic wave. About 3/4 of adults in the country of 1.3 billion people have had one shot and 30% are fully vaccinated, according to government figures. More than 200,000 people died in a devastating COVID wave from mid-April to mid-June. Hundreds of thousands of people were stricken with the Delta variant, and many hospitals and crematoriums were overwhelmed. Cases have since fallen sharply since fewer than 20,000 infections are reported each day, and much social activity has resumed.
Ild News will be back with more updates. Please don't go away.
Isa ang mga kooperatiba sa mga naapektuhan ng COVID-19 crisis. Sa isang survey ng Cooperative Development Authority, nangangamba ang mga kooperatiba sa pagbaba ng kanilang kita dahil sa mahirap na transportasyon at komunikasyon. And one of the most important questions is, how can they transition to digitalization? In this episode, we will discuss the journey of one cooperative that remained resilient during the pandemic. Ms. Faye Visa, General Manager of the Pantukan Chess Club Multipurpose Cooperative, and Mr. Bradley Pineda of Globe Business will share their insights.
When the pandemic has opened our eyes to the many possibilities that we can do with the power of the digital,
Globe Business vision to equip cooperatives with digital solutions so that they can become a kooperatibang matatag.
All these in this episode of Open for Business.
Welcome back to the news. A new climate study concludes that worldwide production of fossil fuels will have to be cut by more than half to avert dangerous levels of global warming. The United Nations report also says that many governments plan to double coal, oil, and natural gas output through 2030.
The UN Environment Programme today released its Production Gap Report, which found that despite increased climate ambitions and net zero commitments, governments still plan to produce more than double the amount of fossil fuels in 2030 than what would be consistent with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Over the next 2 decades, governments are collectively projecting an increase in global oil and gas production and only a modest decrease in coal production. The report also shows that countries have directed over $300 billion in new funds towards fossil fuel activities since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, more than they have towards clean energy. The Secretary General said that the report shows that there is still a long way to go to a clean energy future. He added that it is urgent that all remaining public financiers, as well as private finance, including commercial banks and asset managers, switch their funding from coal to renewables to promote full decarbonization of the power sector and access to renewable energy for all. Turning to Syria, where
The report comes days before a climate summit convenes.
Meanwhile, more than 250,000 homes in France were without electricity today after gale force winds swept the north of the country overnight. Power grid operator Enedis said today. Rail traffic was also affected by Storm Aurora, which has been causing devastation since Wednesday afternoon. Transport Minister Jean-Baptiste Djebbari said in a tweet that the Ile-de-France region around Paris, Normandy, northern France, and eastern Lorraine regions were the worst affected. In the Western Brittany region, a number of homes were also destroyed by flash floods. Some 3,000 technicians have been deployed to restore power supply, according to the power source. The Aurora gales, which headed towards the east of the country overnight, had triggered orange level weather alerts. The hot set the second highest alert level in many parts of the country on Wednesday. Now, this had now been lifted in most places, but Thursday, some 15 departments in the east of the country were still on the lower yellow alert.
Nearly 200 people have died in floods and landslides in India and Nepal, according to officials, with whole families buried in their homes and 2 young girls swept away as forecasters warned of yet more heavy rain. Take a look.
इसमें हमारे पास जो भी फोर्स हमारी एसडीआरएफ है, फायर ब्रिगेड है, पीएसी है, तमाम जगहों पे हमने छोटे-छोटे टुकड़ियां बनाकर वो भिजवाए, कई राफ्ट, कई रस्सी से। हमने इवन जो है अभी एनडीआरएफ की भी जो छोटी-छोटी टुकड़ियां करवाकर वो भी भिजवा रखी है। कई जगह रास्ते बंद है, तो प्रशासन के साथ मिलकर जो है लगातार हम लोग रास्ते खोलने में भी लगे हुए हैं।
The unusually late deluge of rain in the region saw Nepal record the sharpest rise in casualties overnight, with 88 people now dead, among them a family of 6 whose house was obliterated by an avalanche of soil and debris. In Kerala, in southern India, where 42 people have died since last week, forecasters issued warnings of heavy rains in at least 3 districts in the state after a respite in recent days. The flooding in the state adjoining the Arabian Sea, which scientists say is warming, has revived the memories of 2018, when nearly 500 people perished in the worst flooding there in a century. The Met Office issued a red alert for the state, warning that extremely heavy rainfall would continue in Darjeeling, Kalimpong, and Alipurduar on Thursday. Experts say that they were victims of the ever more unpredictable and extreme weather that has hit South Asia in recent years, caused by climate change and exacerbated by deforestation, damming, and excessive development.
Meanwhile, the Philippine government plans to close coal-fired power plants in Mindanao once it finds the financing needed to improve the generating capacity of Agus Pulangi hydropower plant, a move aimed to help address climate change. In a speech during the virtual launch of the Sustainable Finance Roadmap and its guiding principles, Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez III said the government is currently looking for a financing mechanism to improve Agus Pulangi's generating capacity as part of its commitment to utilize more sustainable energy sources. Take a look.
As we improve our renewable energy resource, we will retire coal-fired plants in the region. This landmark project will be launched at the COP26 meeting in Glasgow. This could serve as a model for coal-dependent emerging economies to gradually shift from fossil fuels to more sustainable and greener energy sources. In addition, the government is expanding assets and crops that the Philippine Crop Insurance Corporation covers to provide our farmers adequate protection from crop losses while reinforcing risk mitigation and resilience efforts. This is the reason why we partnered with the UK government to implement the ASEAN Low Carbon Energy Program in the Philippines. Under this program, the United Kingdom government provided assistance to the Philippine government in establishing an intergovernmental body that would support the development of a green and sustainable economy. This body is led by the Department of Finance and the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas as the main climate policy-making government agencies. We prefer the nickname Green Force for this technical working group. It is certainly more colorful and captures the idea that fiscal policies will be the driving force in building a truly green future for our people.
Now, here in the U.S., a former student pleaded guilty to killing 17 people in a shooting rampage at a high school in Parkland, Florida, and apologized in court to relatives of the victims. Nicholas Cruz, who was 19 at the time, took a legally purchased AR-15 assault rifle into Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, his former school, on Valentine's Day in 2018 and killed 17 students and staff members. Watch this.
Take off my mask.
Sure.
I am very sorry for what I did, and I have to live with it every day. And that if I were to get a second chance, I will do everything in my power to try to help others. And I am doing this for you, and I do not care if you do not believe me. And I love you, and I know you don't believe me, but I have to live with this every day. And it brings me nightmares, and I can't live with myself sometimes. But I try to push through because I know that's what you guys would want me to do. I'm sorry, and I can't even watch TV anymore. And I'm trying my best to maintain my composure, and I just want you to know I'm really sorry. And I hope you give me a chance to try to help others. If I believe it's your decision to decide where I go and whether I live or die. Not the jury's. I believe it's your decision. I'm sorry. Yeah.
On the day of the attack, Cruz arrived at the school in an Uber, began shooting indiscriminately at students and staff, and fled 9 minutes later, leaving behind a scene of carnage. He was arrested nearby shortly afterwards. Footage recovered from his phone showed he had filmed his attacks or plans to attack his former school, saying his goal was to kill at least 20 people. Cruz told a detective after his arrest that he heard demons ordering him to buy weapons, kill animals, and destroy everything. The shooting was the worst school massacre in the United States since the horror at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut in 2012, which left 26 dead. Cruz brought the weapon legally, despite having been in local records as having a history of mental health problems. Expelled from school for disciplinary reasons, Cruz was known to be fixated on firearms and had reportedly been identified as a potential threat to his classmates. President Biden said he wants Congress to pass laws that would require background checks on all gun sales and ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines.
She was the life of the party. She was the energy in the room.
Staying in the U.S., former U.S. President Donald Trump announced plans today to launch his own social networking platform called Truth Social, which is expected to begin its beta launch for invited guests next month. Take a look. Now, Trump said he created Truth Social and TMTG to stand up to the tyranny of big techs. The former U.S. president used Twitter to extend his political influence. He was banned from Twitter and Facebook in the wake of the Capitol insurrection carried out by his supporters on January 6th this year. Trump's announcement will likely fuel speculation he will run for president in 2024.
The United States, Britain, and France confirmed Wednesday to the UN that North Korea has made progress in its weapons programs following the groundbreaking launch of a ballistic missile from a submarine. Speaking to the media one after the other, ahead of a closed-door Security Council meeting that had been urgently called by Washington and London, the ambassadors of the Western states all condemned the launch the day before as a new provocation.
It announced submarine-launched ballistic missile test on October 19th, local time. The United States and many of the Council members have condemned the launch, which violated multiple Security Council resolutions. Each new advancement of the DPRK's weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missile programs destabilizes the region and threatens international peace and security. The United States calls on the DPRK to refrain from further provocations and engage in sustained and substantive dialogues. Our position remains clear. The DPRK must abide by the Security Council resolutions, and it is time to engage in sustained and substantive dialogue toward the goal of complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
North Korea accused the United States of double standards over weapons testing, state media reported Thursday, after an emergency UN Security Council meeting on the issue. Pyongyang fired a new type of submarine-launched ballistic missile, or SLBM, on Tuesday, the latest in a series of tests in recent weeks, prompting the U.S. and Britain to call the diplomatic meeting in New York. But a spokesperson from the North's foreign ministry said the test was not aimed at the United States and was carried out purely for the defense of the country. So there is no need for the U.S. to worry or trouble itself over test firing, according to the spokesperson in a statement carried by the official KCNA news agency. The statement added Washington's criticism of the North for developing and test firing the same weapon system as the one the U.S. possesses or is developing is a clear expression of double standards.
Meanwhile, South Korea's first domestically developed space rocket failed to put its dummy payload into orbit after its maiden launch on Thursday. That according to President Moon Jae-in. The launch and all three stages of the Korea Space Launch Vehicle 2 worked, as did the payload separation, Moon said. But putting a dummy satellite into orbit remains an unfinished mission. The Korea Space Launch Vehicle 2, informally called Nuri and emblazoned with the South Korean flag, rose upwards from the launch site in Gyeonggi. South Korea plans to carry out 4 more launches of the Nuri until 2027 to increase reliability, according to the Korea Aerospace Research Institute, or KARI, that is overseeing the launch. South Korea is aiming to send a probe to the moon by 2030, while South Korea says it intends to use Nuri to launch satellites. The test has also been viewed as part of the country's ongoing ramp-up in weapons development. Ballistic missiles and space rockets use similar technology, and Pyongyang put a 300-kilogram satellite into orbit in 2012 in what Western countries condemned as a disguised missile test.
Chinese Foreign Ministry says NBA player Enes Kanter's attack on Chinese President Xi Jinping on social media is a ridiculous allegation that is not worth refuting. Take a look.
你提到的这个球员，企图拿适当问题来博眼球、求关注，他的谬论不值一驳。我们欢迎所有不带偏见、秉持客观立场的各国朋友到西藏参观访问，同时绝不接受那些对西藏发展进步的攻击抹黑。
The basketball player slammed Chinese President Xi Jinping as a brutal dictator and declared that Tibet belongs to the Tibetan people, risking reigniting tensions between Beijing and the U.S. Basketball League.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Karamihan sa ating mga Pilipino, mahilig talaga sa snacks, ano?
Kasi yun ang hinahanap ng bibig.
Pero yun lang ang pinakalibangan namin.
Aba meron nang nauuso na healthy version ng mga ito.
Kangkong to, gulay to, nagugustuhan rin kasi it's healthy for the children. Kung may Korean craze ngayon sa Pilipinas, may craze rin para sa banana chips natin doon sa Korea.
Unique siya kasi madami ding health benefits at pasok sa panlasa nating mga Pinoy.
Ito na ang inyong starter pack for a healthy snack. Ako po, si Robin Padilla, at ito po ang ulat, kaagapay sa hanap buhay.
Welcome back. Supply bottlenecks and shortage of goods caused significantly elevated prices in most areas of the country, the Fed said in its, according to the Federal Reserve today. The constraints and shortage of goods caused significantly elevated prices in most areas of the country. The Fed said in its Beige Book report on economic conditions, which noted rising uncertainties about the outlook. While economic activity increased at a modest to moderate rate over the last several weeks, in much of the country, the pace of growth slowed, constrained by supply chain disruptions, labor shortages, and uncertainty around the Delta variant of COVID-19. The analysis, based on discussions with business and community contacts in the central bank's 12 regions, was prepared in advance of the Fed's next policy meeting, November 2 to the 3rd. Despite again reporting the U.S. pandemic recovery losing steam, Fed officials are expected to announce plans to start to pull back on stimulus measures amid concerns about rising inflation. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has been saying for some time that the price spikes are expected to be transitory and retreat as pandemic-related disruptions are resolved. But economists increasingly are warning that they could become a lasting issue.
Iglesia Ni Cristo members in Ottawa participate in a cleanup drive as part of the GLAD Cleaning the Capital. Ross Castro reports.
The City of Ottawa holds GLAD Cleaning Up the Capital to benefit communities, city parks, and streets. This is a citywide campaign every spring and fall. Residents come together as a community, keeping cities clean and green.
This year marks the 20th year of the program. As leaves start to dry up and fall, the dried leaves and branches accumulate on the ground, and this may bring mold and pests in the area. Cleaning during fall season prepares parks and community areas for spring, preventing lawn damage.
Volunteers from a local church in Ottawa, the Iglesia Ni Cristo Church of Christ, are some of the participants. They have been a part of this program for 15 years now and have cleaned most areas of Ottawa.
Bags of trash, litter, and dried leaves were collected today. Confederation Park Councillor Teresa Kavanagh acknowledges the INC giving volunteers through a letter of appreciation. Councillor Keith Eglay, meanwhile, extends his appreciation to the volunteers through a video greeting.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to take this opportunity to thank all the volunteers in the church for the great work that they do each and every day in the community. it's especially important, I think, to thank you for all the great volunteer work that you have done while COVID has been in our city.
The INC Giving Project is initiated by the Church of Christ, or Iglesia ni Cristo, to help our community. And in this case, we did a cleanup drive here in Confederation Park in Ottawa, Canada. And the aim of this project by the Church of Christ is to help our community, brethren inside the Church of Christ, even those who are non-members, join this initiative to further influence others in helping out in the community and even to our fellow men all over the world.
For Eagle News Ottawa, this is Rosalie Castro. We live in interesting times.
Thank you so much. And, you know, that's actually something that we have to keep doing, even though there's no event. Yep. And that's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. The news continues tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, as I always say, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. And
we live
in interesting times.
Patuloy nating ipagmalaki ang musikang sariling atin dito lang sa natatanging programa sa telebisyon na naghahandog sa inyo ng pawang orihinal ng mga awiting Pilipino.